Good evening and welcome to this edition of A Walk Down Memory Lane. I'm your host, Earl Baston. Joining me is co-host Dennis Brown, and we are joined by Bermuda Olympian swimmers in Jenny Smack, Chris Fluke, and Julian Fletcher. Well, folks, thank you very much for taking this opportunity to come on and talk about your sport back in the day. And of course, Jenny and Chris, you both went to the 1992 Olympics in Spain, but before that, what got you both involved in the sport back then? Jenny?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. My career started at around age 7 or 8. I actually learned to swim, or I was swimming at 18 months. So I loved the water from an early age. But I started in a club, actually was the Bears Club with Mickey Johnson, and then soon transitioned to Harbor Club and just enjoyed the training at the club level. And then at around age 8, almost 9, I started to do mornings with the national team, and that was with Gareth Davies. So those are the early years and the start.
What about you, Chris?
Well, I started quite late, actually. I started started showing up to club swimming at about 15, 16 or so. I just used to, live around the water and boats and stuff growing up in St. David's, a lot of fishing and swimming, but never really took it serious. It wasn't until I got to high school when people were like, sort of doing the inter-house swimming, you're pretty quick. You should show up to one of these things. So I decided to make some good friends real quick, and the rest is history. Just, I swam for a short career. I mean, back in, I guess it was about 1992 or so, I ended up with a shoulder injury. And that's progressively got worse. So I ended up finishing in about the last sort of major meet was in 94. Yeah.
Now, Julian, you were just a tad bit later, but what got you started?
I kind of used swimming as like an after-school program sport. I was obviously one of those kids that was put in a lot of different sports, and most of it was the culture in the sport. Martin Allen was the coach at the time for the club I was with, Sharks, and then Ben Smith quickly took over, and Ben was a role model and still is a role model to me. And definitely just the people I met and interaction and community in the sport of swimming was honestly the best part, easiest decision for me to make, and then stuck with it all the way through college and then through to the 2016 games.
Sure. Dennis?
Yeah, good night, everybody. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Question to everyone. So you're known as swimmers to us, but did any of you play any other sport before you specialized in swimming?
Well, I think Julian touched on. Julian touched on it earlier. When was the last time you saw a tuna run across your yard?
I think playing a sport and playing it well is two different things. But swimming and swimmers are known to be unathletic out of the water. So I'm sure that all three of us tried a bunch of different sports. House meets and inter-school meets and track and field and football and rugby, and I did sailing for a bit, and just kind of as a young kid, I think it's important to be experienced to as many different sports as you can, and then find one that you like, at age 15 or 16, and just really enjoy it rather than get forced to do it too young and then get burnt out. So, but I know Chris is an avid aquatic sportsman, so he's probably been in a bunch of like free diving competitions and stuff too. So
yeah, I mean, I stayed fairly active in the water, but not really competitively. A lot of it was job sort of task loading, diving and free diving, and sort of in and out of the water. Currently, I work at the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences, but before that, I did 16 years at the aquarium as the collector of specimens. So that was pretty much every day in the water, so never far from the ocean.
Yeah, and for me, I was involved in a number of sports and activities, and believe it or not, ballet was one of them. So yeah, running and gymnastics and horse riding. So pretty active and enjoyed the variety until I had to make a choice in the number of practices and hours.
Sure.
So, Chris, you had a little dab at football as well?
Oh no, my feet are way too big for football.
Okay.
You heard the man. He said it's from St. David, so cricket, man.
The feet don't fit in the shoes.
Okay. So Jenny said earlier she was about 8 when she competed in her first local meet. How old were you guys, Chris and Julian? How old were you guys when you competed in your first local meet?
Yeah, Chris.
I guess I mean I can remember back in sort of primary school days at St. George's Prep, they would have the inter-school swim meets, and I'd always enter in those and stuff like that. But as far as the training side of things, it wasn't until I was about, like I said, 15 or 16 before I got fully involved in the training and committing to the hours.
Yeah, I vividly remember, going to those school training sessions, and everyone's wearing their shorts and no one's wearing a swim kit. But that's kind of the embarrassing part about wearing swimming, having to go out there with your briefs and your swimsuit on. But I started probably around the same age, 8, 9, and then actually didn't go to my first international meet till I was 15, 16. So pretty much a late bloomer in my career, into competitive swimming.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you all, who was the biggest influence for you to stay in the sport and then choose your discipline? Jenny?
Yeah, I think the easiest of those two is the discipline. We kind of joke in swimming, you're a breaststroker or you swim other strokes. So my natural ability was in breaststroke, and all three of us actually happen to be breaststrokers. But yeah, so I think that just was the stroke that I enjoyed, and it came naturally, and so it followed from there. And in terms of influence, swimming was, I think, relatively young as a sport in terms of visibility. So the biggest influence was probably my coach, who was Gareth at the time. And very much encouraged and supported and motivated in terms of what was possible. So he probably had the greatest influence.
What about you, Chris?
I would agree. That I was going to say Gareth Davis, Richard Goodwin. There's so many, so many along the way, local coaches that really committed so much time to these young swimmers and still do. It's really it's quite a good thing.
Julie?
Yeah, I definitely think there are a lot of swimmers out there that kind of influenced my career. Roy Birch being one of them. I remember watching him go out to compete at international meets at a young age, and so coaches like Ben Smith and Richard Goodwin, have played a huge role. But then going into college, having a college coach that supported me as a sprint breaststroker and didn't try and force me to do something that I didn't want to do, like backstroke or IM. But yeah, most of it is kind of your coaching and as you go along the way, progressing through your levels of kind of levels of development in the sport.
Now breaststroke is very technical. How much has it changed, Jenny, if you've stayed in sort of contact of how much it's changed over the year? How much has it changed from when you were swimming to now to present day? Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's changed, and as some may know, I spend a lot of time on deck as a coach for the Gold Squad, and it's been fun to see the evolution of the sport in many ways. But from a breaststroke perspective, we didn't used to be able to submerge our head. Some of you on this may smile, and no dolphin kick. And so, even when you look at records, you think, gosh, I wish I could have done a dolphin kick or submerged my head. But yeah, it evolves like everything else. And but the fundamentals are the same in terms of timing. And I'm a big fan of the basics and getting the basics correct. So that's really the place that I think if you're wanting to be successful, it stands the test of time.
Sure. Dennis?
Yeah. So a question to everyone. So you competed a lot on the local stage. How did you find it when you competed in your first international meet, a foreign meet, against foreign opposition? What was the difference to you from competing against locals to now competing against people you didn't even know? What was the difference?
We can start with you, Julia.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a huge difference. The international meets that you kind of get into when you're a kind of entry level swimmer at first is the Caribbean meets, and you notice, in the Caribbean meets, there's a ton of good sprinters, and there's a ton of like kids that are just twice the size of you, and they hit their growth spurts early, and it does, if it gets very competitive. I went to my first meet in around 2004 2005 in Jamaica, and that was a Carifta meet, and it was very hard to compete with those guys, especially at a younger younger bracket of the age group. But you kind of got to push through those factors of competing internationally and reset your goals. It's definitely a great experience going to an international meet for an athlete to be able to reset their goals and see where their bar is. Um, you know, Growing up in Bermuda, there was competition, in the pool when I was growing up in early 2000s. And then it's good to kind of reset your bar a little bit and reach for something higher. And swimming's a great sport because it's all based on timing, so you can really push yourself and know where you're at with your times that you come out with.
Chris?
Yeah, I suppose the biggest change for those international meets, the first international meet I did was in Curacao, and that was quite an eye opener because we went from swimming here at a 25-meter pool to a 50-meter pool, and it just seemed like this long swim, which was actually better for me because I was terrible in the dive and the turns. So I actually quite enjoyed it. But I mean, that was quite an eye opener to how many people were actually involved in the sport. How big it was getting. I mean, to see it now, it's huge compared to what we were dealing with when we were doing swimming. But still, it's that, like Julian said, that access to outside talent to test your goals, test your bar. I remember we used to bring in swimmers from other clubs locally here for some swim meets, but still being in that 50-meter pool, dealing with that next level of swimmer was so important.
Yeah, I think Ryan Lochte came here in like '96 and broke a bunch of our pool records. We had an open category for pool records at Bassa, and I'm not sure if you guys would have been in that meet, but he was probably like 14, 15 years old, and then he went on to be multiple Olympic gold medalist and world champion and world record holder. So yeah, it's kind of cool having those guys come to Bermuda and compete.
I remember getting to some of those first big meets that we went to, Jenny, and it was sort of, you're standing on the block looking to the side and you can't see past the guy next to you because he's just that big, and you're thinking, I got to swim against this? It's like, really? Some big people out there.
Yeah, I was a little younger. My first international meet, I was 9, and I do remember it vividly, and some really good life lessons in terms of the food that was there. Breakfast one morning was raw hot dogs, and I remember Gareth saying, "You need to eat. There's no choice. You need to eat." And just suffice to say, that wasn't my best performance, but you learn to deal with whatever's thrown your way, whether it's lack of sleep, partying that's going on with different cultures, and late into the night and lack of sleep, and that carried through. And Chris joked about the looking left or right, and at the time, I even remember just prior to the Olympics and the lead up at that time was, there was a lot of substances and women who looked like men. And, you had to focus on your goals and why you were there and really just take it in stride.
But we're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about just that, the evolution of getting to the Olympics for each and every one of you. We'll be right back.
John Barrett & Son, Bermuda's leading distributor of fine beverages, have brought us something fresh and exciting this month. Mystic Juices, skillfully blended for captivating flavor and loaded with nutritional value. Mystic Juices not only taste remarkably good, one serving will supply an abundance of vitamins A and C, more than the certified measure needed to meet your daily requirements. This month we're featuring delicious and nutritious Mystic Juices in an enticing range of flavors in 64 and 16-ounce bottles. Lindo's, why go anyplace else?
My inspiration to write this book has to do with empowering. I want people to understand what it looks like when you are in a position when you don't have the tools around you. If you know me or don't know me, the game, the beautiful game of football, soccer, is and always was a way out. Still fearful on what to do, what would happen if I say something.
What can we do in this book to incorporate tools to help specifically our group of young people in Bermuda?
Could you imagine doing a read with little people and breaking everything down for them and having them to have a voice and having conversation pieces, if it's chapter by chapter?
And welcome back. Well, Julian, your story of qualifying for the Olympics, we because it was just so recent, it was only what, 5 years ago?
Yeah, about
Something like
five.
that?
Feels
Yeah.
like yesterday, but yeah, probably 5-6 years now.
Yeah, it feels like yesterday, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But Jenny, in your lead up to qualifying for the Olympics, what was your biggest challenge?
I was actually relatively fortunate. The time standards were set well in advance, and the Pan Am Games were in Cuba the year prior or the summer prior. So I managed to qualify at that time. So it really shifted to preparation for, the several months that led up to that.
What about you, Chris?
Pretty much the same. I mean, we qualified at the same meet, and I spent a year in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania, and trained with the team there at college, doing their year. And then at the end of NCAA's, the coach Donnie Miller there was great, and he basically one-on-one kept me going through what I needed to get to for Olympics. But yeah, we all qualified pretty much the year before.
Yeah, and it was a transition year for us. As you may know, several of us were a similar age, so we were transitioning to university and college. So I did a year at prep school at Petty, and Chris Martin, who was the coach there, actually was one of the U.S. Olympic team coaches. So I had the good fortune to train with actually a number of swimmers who went on to the Olympics. Nelson Diebel ended up winning the gold. So it was great. It was great preparation, and it took a lot of the edge off. These are swimmers that you train with and know, and they're friends of yours. So we were very lucky.
Yeah. And Julian, just relive those moments, because it actually came down to getting the qualification times. They weren't out as early as you would have liked them to be. Am I right?
Yeah, so I went for the qualifying for 2012 and unfortunately missed the standard, and that was when I was in college. So that was kind of a tough time for me, dealing with that failure of not being able to go, and then having to reassess my goals at the end of my college career, and then figure out what to do for the next 4 years. And after college, I joined a pro team similar to Jenny, and it really does help the morale of the swimmers, swimming around people that are the world best, and you know that you can keep up with in training. So I think more than anything, that next 4-year cycle helped with my confidence going forward. And unfortunately, I didn't have the route that I wanted to take, which qualification opens the year before. And usually, a lot of the athletes will hit their times the year before so that they can then prepare their training cycle for that final year leading up into the Olympics. And if they don't hit their times the year before, then they have to go to a lot of last chance meets for that year. So that kind of wear and tear on your body of training hard and then resting and tapering off, training hard, resting, tapering off, is really difficult for swimmers because the peak in swimming doesn't happen at each time you race. It kind of happens over a large cycle. And I was fortunate enough to be selected and made the B standard time before the last chance meet. So it was actually incredible for me to experience that. I flew back to Bermuda with a guy I was training with, Azad Albarazi, who was a 101 100 breaststroker, 100 in his prime. And I basically raced up alongside him in our home pool at the National Stadium. I think it was the first time I raced at the National Stadium long course, and just an incredible experience. I could hear the fans shouting every time I came up for a stroke, which is unique in our stroke because you get to breathe, your ears come out of the water each stroke. So that was just incredible. And my dad was there with like one of those conch shells that sounded like an air horn, and it kind of helped me pace that last 15 meters when my body was filling up with lactate. But yeah, reached the B standard there, and then was selected to go after that. So incredible experience to do that at home for sure.
Dennis?
Yeah. So can every one of you just tell us what does it take? Like what sort of physical preparation that you have to go through? Because I used to play for the national team and stuff like that, and I know what it takes to compete at a high level. What sort of fitness regime did you guys have to go through to compete at your optimal levels? Like, does
Christian,
everybody?
Lots and lots of hours in the pool. I mean, living in St. David's, I would have to wake up at sort of like, 5, leave the house at like 5, 15 or so to make practice for 6. And then you're training for a couple hours. Then you're trying to go to school or work in between. You're expected to do weights in between some ground training, and then training again in the evening, another 10,000 meters or so. That's a lot of time in the pool. Julia touched on it earlier, and the fact that, trying to get that peak right, trying to get that training just right so that you're ready for that particular meet that you're really sort of dialing in on. It can be very difficult, but what a lot of people don't realize is how much mental goes into it as well. You have these sort of crescendos of emotion, and the fact that you're building up to these races, sometimes they go good, sometimes they don't. And how do you deal with those feelings, and then to get back on the horse and go back to the pool the next morning and start again, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of self-control.
Jenny?
Yeah. At that time, it really was a combination of a lot of pool time, weights, some cardio in terms of running. It's evolved since then. As I went through university, we started to introduce more flexibility. But Chris is correct in terms of the mental focus and the work. Gareth, again, was really, really good about having us do breathing and visualization. And we used to have some good giggles. Sometimes we took it seriously. Sometimes we don't. I see the smirks. It was also about having fun. And there was a group of us coming through. And as you know, a big swimming contingent in 92, which made the work and the preparation much, much easier than doing it on your own.
For sure. Yeah. That was a good group to travel with.
I think the yardage is, also changed throughout your career too. You start in the younger stages of your career, and your yardages are less, then you might not be doing 5K, 6K per practice. You might just be doing 3 or 4, and then you start to kind of build up on that. And once you get to like collegiate level swimming, then you're doing 20 hours in the pool a week, and then weight training outside of that. And then you got your flexibility and strength and some, dry land training, which is basically like track work and bands work and stuff like that you do outside of the pool. And yeah, it does get very competitive because, at that stage in your life, what other people are doing. And going back to that international, exposure to meets, you get to the world championship stage and you see what they're doing. You see, what all of the teams had done to prepare for that meet, and it kind of puts things in perspective. And yeah, I think Jenny, you went to UVA, right? So you had
No,
that. No,
I
no,
was at Northwestern.
Northwestern. Sorry. So you had that kind of that peak of training cycles once you got to college. But yeah, it changes throughout your career. And then I found that once I got older, you can kind of cut back on it a little bit. But
You got a follow up, Dennis?
Yeah, so I want to know, like, from everybody, because every sports person goes through some sort of adversity. You're not sure of yourself at different times in your career, and that is the mental part that Jenny talked about. So how did you guys tackle adversity to come back ahead and to progress in your sport? How did you tackle that?
I see Jenny smiling, so Jenny, go ahead.
It was one of those moments, do I share or do I not? But I'm going to go ahead. Being a female, it's really important to understand where and why and how growth impacts your career. So I started at 9, and breaststrokers, and at that age, most of them are really tiny and quite spindly looking. Same was true for me. And then life happens and growth happens in many ways. And the body changes. And for me, I was one of very few females, and actually the only female on in later years. And so it was different, and with 2 male coaches. And so those body changes and understanding what they mean, we know more now. And I think it's more, we're more open about talking about those changes. But that was a shift, and very few know that I qualified for the Commonwealth Games in freestyle, not breaststroke, and that was just pure stubbornness and willpower. But that was a difficult time in understanding and trying to fix it, and hours trying to fix strokes, and you just have to stay with it. But eventually we worked it out, and I swam breaststroke in the Pan Am Games and finals. So, but yeah, you have to keep your eye on the ball and have a little bit of patience.
Chris?
A little different with me in the fact that a shoulder injury basically stopped me. I ended up having a bad fall in college. We won't talk into the particulars of that fall, but fell straight on my clavicle and separated my clavicle from my shoulder. And then so years and years of trying to swim, the breaststroke is very much in the shoulders, progressively got worse. Ended up having to go to Canada, get an operation done where they shortened my clavicle. So that stopped things for me. I remember fighting that injury for so long and thinking, no, it's not going to get me. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to fix it. I can get better. I can get better. But ultimately, time and wear and tear, that's a hard thing to swallow. Your body's saying to you, stop, and you don't want to.
Yeah. Julian?
I kind of talked about adversity a little bit before 2012, but to kind of piggyback on Chris, injuries is tough for any athlete to go through, and there's a lot of stuff that that athletes have to realize. It might just be something in the moment, and you can progress through this. I know swimming you know, there's probably adversity that you have to go through every time you jump in a cold pool in the morning at 6 a.m., right? Like no one wants to be there and wants to do that. But I remember, you know, speaking with some of the guys on the GB team, like James Guy later on in his career, and you know, he said something to me, and it was basically, you don't know why you're going. You might not know why you're going to practice every day, trying hard, and you know, giving it your best. But in the long run, it's going to all pay out. So a lot of times it might not make sense on the day, but it's important to just give it your all and, you know, persevere through each day, because in the long run, you know, that those all of those days compiled together will give you the big picture of why you're doing it, which is, you know, for us to make the Olympic Games, which is what we've done. So that's kind of the cool picture, and that's a message that I would give to any kids that I coached, or you know, any other kids in sports that are looking to progress into, you know, that professionally.
Sure. We're going to take another commercial break, but we have a question before that where we can all think over it. What are your thoughts on the current swimming program, and do you think the swimming program can be diversified and include longer distance swimmers? We're going to take a commercial break, and when we come back, we'll kind of discuss that point there. We'll be right back.
The use of butter goes back millennia, and its exalted status in the cooking world and in so many kitchens is undeniable. Around 3,000 years ago, ghee, or clarified butter, was developed in India and is the cooking oil of choice in many regions of the subcontinent, and compared to butter has a higher smoke point, reduced dairy solids, and a more robust, nuanced flavor. And to Organic Valley, creators of a certified organic version of this versatile traditional staple. This month we're featuring Organic Valley Ghee Clarified Butter. Lindo's, why go anyplace else?
My inspiration to write this book has to do with empowering. I want people to understand what it looks like when you are in a position when you don't have the tools around you. If you know me or don't know me, the game, the beautiful game of football, soccer, is and always was a way out. Still fearful on what to do, what would happen if I say something.
What can we do in this book to incorporate tools to help specifically our group of young people in Bermuda?
Could you imagine doing a read with little people and breaking everything down for them and having them to have a voice and having conversation pieces, if it's chapter by chapter?
Welcome back. Actually, what we'll do is we'll take part of the first part of it. What are your thoughts on the current swimming program? Jenny, you're still involved, so what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, the current program has evolved. It's different from when I was participating. There was a national swimming national team, and we trained together, and that's no longer the case. And so there are a couple of programs that are taking place in parallel. I think that there's a lot of talent in Bermuda, and I think there's a lot of lessons learned over time. And we have a couple of young swimmers participating in the Junior Pan Ams coming up, and the youth games that are on offer for them to get exposure in addition to the CRIFTA and Central American Games. And I think we are more open to more competition. We're in a more fortunate position because we have a 50-meter pool. So I think there are a lot of pluses. We've progressed, and the support is there for the talent and the youth to take advantage of it. So we have the components. I think it's really important that there's the visibility and the encouragement to continue with the sport through college. The life cycle relative to when I was coming through is longer. So the line of sight is for college and beyond. I know for myself, I was done at the end of university, but swimmers are continuing past that. So that's exciting, and I think it's inspiring for those who are coming through.
Chris, are you still in touch with what's going on at the pool?
Not so much. I mean, it took me a long time to actually watch swimming again. You used to flick through the channels and you'd see it come up on TV and you'd quickly flick, it just felt, it was hard to watch. You wanted to be there, that shoulder injury was a real sort of a blow to the sort of mind. But you can't deny what you see in the paper and in the news that the local swimming seems to have a very strong program. It's really sort of commendable to these guys still involved, and Ben for what he's done and carried it on. It's really cool to see.
What about you, Julian?
Yeah, I think that if you look at like the Olympic program and how that's developed, it's great to see that there's gender equality amongst the races. They've added a couple races, sorry, for the females 1500 meters, which previously was the 1,000, I think, and then they've added a men's 1,000. So it's cool to see that those events are being added, and I think that kind of trickles down and into the smaller the local programs. And I hope that and I understood the question a little bit as the swim programs on the Olympic agenda, but I hope that they can open up to more 50 meters of stroke and sprint races at the Olympics and at some of the major meets, because I think that would be huge for the smaller countries who don't have all the resources and kind of develop sprinters at a young age. And I think we have a lot of sprinters in Bermuda and throughout the Caribbean. I think adding those 50-meter events on the Olympics would be huge for our development in the sport. But in terms of the Bermuda programs, I think it's great, that they've been developed very well with the clubs here. I mean, Harbor's is a great club. Sharks is a great club, and I think they both, kind of work together and have good competition at these national championship meets. And it's good to see swimmers going away and competing with our flag on their cap.
Jane, what about the longer distance swimmers? Because often, well, we heard Julian just talk about the sprinters, but there's so many more typical events out there, such as as he said, the 1500. You have the 5,000 and so forth. Do you think we can kind of pinpoint some athletes towards those ones to kind of level it out a bit?
Yeah, I'm smiling because, if you ask a sprinter what a long distance is, they'll say 100 meters. So, it's all relative. Julian's talking about the other end of the spectrum, and I know the same is true in other sports such as track. But at the Gold Squad, we develop all strokes and all distances. We actually discourage specialization at an early age for a number of reasons. And so, Maisha, who's swimming in Junior Pan Am, she's swimming backstroke 100. We've got some coming through in the 200 and 400 freestyle. So that's really a result of that focus. And so I think you'll see a lot more competitive swimmers in a variety of events beyond the 50 free.
Sure. Dennis?
We had a little bit of, I would say, controversy leading up to the Olympics, Tokyo Olympics. So what are you guys' opinions on the two swimmers who were not granted permission to represent Bermuda in the Olympics? I think that was a big talking point at that time. Some people look at it as they didn't qualify, so they shouldn't have the opportunity to go. Where do we draw the line between development and wanting to win? So what are you guys' feelings about them not being granted permission to represent Bermuda?
I'll go with Chris first.
I don't know enough about the actual the facts of the case, so to speak. I'm not fully versed on why they weren't allowed to go or whatever, but I think that it is clear that with going to the Olympics and to the Pan Am Games, Commonwealth Games, and stuff like that, there is a standard that is set to reach those standards. if you don't reach those standards, you don't qualify to go. I mean, it's not really any other way to cut it. You need to have that level of performance. If not, you're going to have thousands and thousands of heats, and that swim meet will take about a year to complete because everybody will enter. So I don't know about their case in particular, but I think it goes back to that mental sort of up and down of the sport. You build up so much to get to a certain point. I mean, there was one year where I had 1/100th of a second plague me. I mean, that's less than half a fingernail. And I kept missing the qualifying time by that 1/100th of a second. But when I finally got there, it was huge, and I ended up beating it by about 30 hundredths of a second. Didn't seem like anything at the time, but for some reason that little bit stopped me from going. And you think, well, 1/100th of a second, that's going to prevent you from going to a swim meet. It is what it is.
Julian?
Yeah, I think me personally, I went to the 2016 Olympic Games on universality, so I feel for these swimmers. I've trained with them both, Maddie and Jesse. They're both extremely fast and great ambassadors for sport, and it is very unfortunate what they had to go through. And I think at the end of the day, going back to adversity, I really hope that these two athletes can kind of show some adversity, and I know they'll show some adversity moving forward to try and make a point out of their careers and kind of get through this setback and push for their ultimate goal of sporting excellence. So yeah, I definitely feel for the athletes, and I know it was a tough decision to make. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on it.
Jenny?
Yeah, I think anything that plays out in the press is tough, but I am similar to Chris in that I'm a fan of qualifying standards. They were well known prior to this past year. So a standard is a standard, and I think it's important to make a distinction between around the point of development, which I heard you say, Dennis, and we're seeing more of the youth games, which are for development, and there are avenues for development. The Olympics is the pinnacle, and I'm a supporter of standards being set and standards being met.
Follow up, Dennis?
Yeah, because I was in a meeting a Zoom meeting with the Association of Football, and one of the things that came up was how far do you go to develop, and then how far do you want to win? What ages are you talking about developing at the national level, and what ages are you talking about winning? And that's why I wanted to bring that up, because at some point at the national level, we're going to win. And and I'm glad Jenny said, the Olympics is the pinnacle. I mean, the Olympics, the CAC Games, the Carifta Games, these are the events that you want to go in to win. And it should be the same thing with football. You specialize in different things, and you know what I mean. So certain things, certain areas you want to go to win. So it's a big distinction at times between development and ultimately everybody wants to win. You can say develop what you want, but you could tell a little 8-year-old you're here for development, what that 8-year-old wants to win. You know what I mean? So we just have to, determine where we want to go as a country, whether we want to develop and just get by, or whether we want to win. And Flora has shown us that if we put the time and investment in, we can win. So we're good enough. And one of the things I told the association last night was that we got 6 teams that qualify for the Olympics. For the World Cup from the CONCACAF in 2026. We should be investing everything that we have to make sure that we're one of those 6. But I'm a big proponent for development, and also at the higher level for winning. So can you guys tell us, what was that experience like when you first got into that Olympic Village? and then the opening ceremonies, and then your opening event. So the Olympic Village, the opening ceremony, and then your first event.
Jenny?
Yeah, I mean, the Olympic Village, just the word Olympics, it's another level. And we had competed at the Commonwealth Games and Pan Am Games, so there were opening ceremonies and athletes' villages there. But it's just really humbling to see athletes from all over the world just congregating, but also focused on what it is that they're there to do. The opening ceremonies, I don't think there's a rush like it. When you go into the stadium and all of that hard work, it's in that moment that you take it in. And again, our coach was fantastic about encouraging us just to take it in. And but to be honest, he was pretty tough about focusing on our race and performing. So we weren't there to play. We took the opening ceremonies in and enjoyed it. And I think, Chris, you were up first. And
unfortunately, I ended up not really getting the opening ceremonies because that men's 100 breast was first thing day one. And you're there for a reason. You want to enjoy it and have the experience, but there's work and play. So you're there to work, and then you can have the play. And like Jenny said, Gareth was really good with balancing that and very fair. I think we couldn't have had a better coach.
Julian?
Yeah, I had to deal with a lot of nerves with, social media and texting, and so all of my friends and people that I hadn't spoken to in years, they had all kind of seen that I was going to the Olympics, and then on the lead up, that kind of gets stressful, having all of these people contacting you and knowing that all of these eyes are on you for that 1 minute while you're racing. And so that I found that stress was new to me, because I'd been to World Championships before, I'd been to Commonwealth Games before, and doing the routine of getting to the games early and going in the practice pool and then racing a few times in the race pool before your actual event, that seemed kind of normal and comfortable to me. But then adding this extra aspect of social media and people texting you and contacting you, and then I did do opening ceremonies, and that was a spectacular experience. But again, like, it's the most amazing experience you'll ever have in your life, and it's just so energizing, and it does kind of get you nervous, but in an excited way. And knowing how to kind of create nerves and make that into fast swimming is something that I think takes time. And I think going into my event, I was probably a bit too nervous and not as excited as I should have been. But you live and you learn, and I think the experience of walking out in the stadium in front of a full set of fans in Rio de Janeiro is incredible, and something that I'll cherish forever, for sure.
Yeah. We're gonna take another commercial break, and when we come back, we'll have more about the Olympics experience with our swimmers. We'll be right back.
John Barrett & Son, Bermuda's leading distributor of fine beverages, have brought us something fresh and exciting this month. Mystic Juices, skillfully blended for captivating flavor and loaded with nutritional value. Mystic Juices not only taste remarkably good, one serving will supply an abundance of vitamins A and C, more than the certified measure needed to meet your daily requirements. This month we're featuring delicious and nutritious Mystic Juices in an enticing range of flavors in 64 and 16-ounce bottles. Lindo's, why go anyplace else?
My inspiration to write this book has to do with empowering. I want people to understand what it looks like when you are in a position when you don't have the tools around you. If you know me or don't know me, the game, the beautiful game of football, soccer, is and always was a way out. I'm still fearful on what to do, what would happen if I say something.
What can we do in this book to incorporate tools to help specifically our group of young people in Bermuda.
Could you imagine doing a read with little people and breaking everything down for them and having them to have a voice and having conversation pieces, if it's chapter by chapter?
Chris, you talked about missing the opening ceremony because your event was first up. But what was that morning like for you? Obviously, you got to do the prelims, and they start rather early. So what was that morning like for you in '92?
I think, all of us could agree that, when you get to that point of your races that morning, you wake up in the morning and you're crystal clear. You know it. You feel everything. Your ears almost ringing when you walk out on that pool deck to begin with. The water's just clear and every sound is crisp. There's nothing like it. I mean, when we first showed up to the training sessions before the events that actually started, a couple of days, arriving early before things started. But yeah, when you walk out into those facilities and you see these top athletes all around you and stuff, there's nothing like it. You can't sort of put words on it. It really is a moving experience. You suddenly get that epiphany of like, you are there with the top athletes and you're here to sink or swim, right?
What about you, Jenny? On your first day of competition, what was that morning like for you?
Yeah, similar. But again, I can't underscore enough the mental preparation that Gareth had us do. And, we were focused. We'd visualized. We knew every step. I still remember the music. It was Van Halen's Standing on Top of the World. And, you just kind of go into that zone. And to be honest, I don't remember much about what was around me. I was there. I had a goal time, and for us, we were coached to perform, and success for us was doing a personal best. It wasn't about the Olympics and just being there. We were there to swim well, and so my focus was on just that. I remember the race being over, and that's an entirely different story. Okay, that's done, and now we can take it in and really enjoy it. But again, a lot of the swimmers were swimmers I swam with. So there wasn't that overwhelm for me in that regard. They're there to swim and there to compete.
I mean,
Julia,
I was going to say that the morning of your event, you better make sure you had extra batteries charged up because your Walkman would be your friend. You wouldn't talk to many people. You would just be in that focus, and everybody around you knew it. It was kind of like that unspoken truth of like, just stay out of the way, just kind of let them do their thing. There's nothing like it.
And I think, for us, traveling as a team, and I don't know if you'd agree, Chris. I mean, we traveled for years together, so you didn't really have to speak. You didn't have to worry too much. But
it was a good unit.
Yeah. So that support, I think, was really something that I know I certainly valued.
I was going to say traveling to something like that by yourself as the only swimmer would be unbelievably challenging. And then Jillian, you talking about the whole social media thing. I hadn't even thought of that. We didn't have that in our days. We didn't have the cell phones and texting and I mean, that would have that's a whole next level of sort of mental fortitude.
Yep, it is.
Well, Julian, for you in Brazil, you didn't have to go through that maze of where the other events were. Although it was in the same section, when you got off the bus, you kind of went right and went straight to the pool thing. But what was that like for you entering the stadium for your first event?
The day of my event, actually, the 100 breaststroke, I think, has been on the same day in the history of the sport of swimming, but at the Olympics. But so I was on the first day, but fortunately for me, the television rights had scheduled the heats later on in the day. So I think I raced around 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock. So they were late heats, and then the finals were even later. And I remember walking in there, and honestly don't remember warming up. I remember doing a few dives, but it was almost like I blacked out up until I went out into the first call room, and and then they checked my suit, they checked my hat, they checked everything. Then you go into the second call room, and you're like shoulder to shoulder with like the guys that are getting world records and winning world championship titles, and and you just got to get in the zone and do what you know that you're capable of doing. And so, diving in, and I could probably relive my race 100 times, but couldn't relive the walk-in from the bus. That's for sure. That's like when your memory just doesn't store anything, and you're just ready to go.
Sure. Any final question, Dennis?
You, Jenny and Chris, you said you were 1992.
Yes.
Yep.
So that was Barcelona with the Dream Team.
Yes, it was.
So did you guys take in any of that? Or
Couldn't get tickets to that.
did you take in any of the Dream Team?
Well, I mean, we would see them walking around the Olympic Village here and there, and it was always sort of that standard reaction of your jaw hits the floor, like that's them, like Yeah, it's some very special memories from that trip for sure.
Okay,
Good.
so
You couldn't have got tickets to that, Dennis. That those were sold out months and months in advance.
for real. Okay, so the last thing I'm gonna ask is, okay, we all know that, and we've probably heard this over and over, that sports builds character. But sports also, and I've learned over the years that sports also reveals character, because as a player and as a coach, it builds character, but it also reveals character. In adverse circumstances, you see who could go to battle with you and who can't, who quits and whatnot. So how did swimming shape each and every one of you as a person in your future years? How did
Jenny?
swimming shape each and every one of you to be what you are today?
Yeah, I think, we could talk about that for a full hour in and of itself. But I think it's just the discipline is one, in terms of setting the goal, doing what it takes to achieve the goal, and also making sacrifices. And then you hit on another one, which is the adversity. And more recently, I've talked about the patience. Sometimes things don't unfold in the timing that we might like or in the way that we might like, but just kind of doing everything that you can in order to achieve the goal that you set out to do, and just understand how to take the lessons learned and apply them moving forward. That's been really critical in life after swimming.
Chris?
Absolutely what Jenny said. And I would only add the fact that, travel, some of the places we went to, some of the people that we met along the way, we would have never been exposed to that living here. I think that was huge in my character building as time went on, and some of the, the things I think back on. And also the perseverance. Don't give up. If you get stuck and stop and something happens, don't just give up. You got to carry on. I mean, the amount of times still to this day, something is getting tough or something's happening, and I can hear Gareth, "Come on, boyo," just resonates forever. Just sets the tone for life.
Julian?
Yeah, absolutely. Perseverance is huge, in swimming, and then throughout life lessons and time management. Like Jenny said, it's there's so many different small factors that being a swimmer will kind of play onto your career. And I think the greatest thing that swimming has done for me is, allowed me to get into good university and become a student athlete, and then learn how to balance, how to schedule my life, with swimming and school. And, and then that kind of later teaches you lessons on how to balance extracurricular with school, and how to kind of separate that mindset and still, tackle goals, short term, long term, and become the best kind of person that you are. But yeah, definitely, the networking that it provides around the world is great. It's a spectacular sport, and would recommend anyone get into sports just for those reasons, developing, as a student athlete.
For sure. Well, I want to thank you three very much for taking us back down memory lane, for your experiences in the sport of swimming at the Olympics and in life as well. I mean, Dennis has asked about the adversities, and you've explained those challenges and probably somebody today is living those same challenges, but look at how you have actually come out on another side and actually become the people you are. And again, congratulations on representing this country at the highest pinnacle of your sport, which is the Olympic Games. And being an Olympian is a big thing for this country. We all know about the medals, but being an Olympian, you are an elite athlete in your right. And I want to say, Dennis, next week we'll be back with another edition of A Walk Down Memory Lane. I will be in Colombia at the Junior Pan Ams, but we will still have our edition of A Walk Down Memory Lane, okay?
Okay.
All right, folks,
Thank you, guys.
enjoy.
Very nice to see you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.